buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Oh, it's the big movie voice today, I can tell. You know, in a world where you thought you were safe, we bring in Brad Keithley to give you all the news that's fit to print to make you cry. Anyway, it's Tuesday, and it is Truth Tuesday, and sometimes, baby, the truth hurts. That's all I can say. It's happening. Today is Tuesday. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is going to join us, and we're going to talk with him about the weekly top 3. We've got some good stuff today. There's some good, I got to tell you, reading some of this commentary for some of these legislators just makes my head explode with just the outright falsehoods and fallacies that keeps getting. But Brad's going to go into that. We're going to talk about that in the first hour here. He's waiting in the wings right now. And then in hour 2, I'm going to do a bit of a recap. Buckle up, Buttercup. I think I'm going to have some things to say about some of that stuff. And then finally, we will finish up the show today with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who will come in to give us our weekly life coaching lesson and uplift, our PMA uplift, which we will probably need by the end of the show today because, dang, so agitating. So I guess without further ado, let's do this thing. Without further ado, let's do this thing. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets in a world. Brad Keithley joins us this morning to discuss. Hey, how you doing, sir? What's going on?
With an introduction like that, I mean, I don't even know what to say. But I do have one question. Yes. New computer?
No, old computer. Still the old computer. And, one of the parts didn't get delivered was supposed to be delivered last week. I was going to do it this weekend. Still didn't get it. Finally got it yesterday. But I did spend a few hours on Friday trying to unsuss all the problems that were going on. So we're limping along for now. We'll make it. But at least everything is as smooth as I can make it right now. So we're all good.
Seems pretty smooth.
All right.
I watched yesterday's show. It seems pretty smooth. So whatever you're doing, whatever magic you're doing.
Yeah, well, it is the marvels of tech support. Have you tried turning it on or turning it off yet? Yes, I finally did that. I finally turned it on and turned it off. Brad, the weekly top 3 this week is just, I've got comments and questions and everything else, but let's start off with the true cause of outmigration. And this all begins with a piece by Zach Fields, one of our favorite people, who tries his damnedest to tie outmigration to, of course, some of the largest government spending components we can find, right? And it's tying it all to things like a decade of education funding cuts. I mean, that is so blatantly false, but people are just going to lap it up like mother's milk, man. And the insecurity and instability of importing gas. And I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get ahead of you. Give me the.
I think we just did the segment.
I am so agitated this morning about this. Go ahead. Tell us a little bit about the outmigration tie, the true cause of outmigration.
Well, this is the Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste on steroids. So outmigration is an issue. Outmigration, for those who haven't followed along, is the fact that we're losing more people than are coming to Alaska. We're losing more residents that are coming to Alaska. We're having a net outmigration, is what the phrase refers to. And it's particularly, I mean, we've tracked this through and we've talked about it on the show. You can look at the IRS data, and it's particularly strong in middle and lower income Alaska families and working class Alaska families. The top 20% actually, looking at IRS data, the top 20% is actually increasing in number in Alaska. So are those over 60. So the retirement or near retirement age classes are increasing. Where the loss is really being suffered is in the middle and lower income Alaskans, and in Alaskans below age 60 and below, which typically is where your working population comes from. So we are suffering. There's no question about the fact that we're suffering. What's happening is everybody is latching onto that for their favorite cause and saying, "Oh, this is the cause of outmigration." And so if we just did this, we would bring more people. We bring more people into Alaska. And Zach Fields is the latest to jump on that crisis. And he's got an op-ed piece in this week's ADN that goes through the laundry list of things that Zach Fields would like to spend on. The title is "We Must Invest in Alaska," and goes through the laundry list of things Zach Fields would like to spend on, starting with essentially a state takeover of Cook Inlet gas by ADA going in and either through low interest loans subsidizing, or just outright buying equity, co-investing with in fields with Blue Crest and with Hex, and essentially transferring a portion of the losses that those fields are incurring, trying to compete with the market, trying to compete in the market, transfer a portion of the losses those fields are suffering, those producers are suffering, to the state, and let the state absorb those losses, and as a consequence, be able to sell state subsidized gas, essentially state subsidized gas in one form or another, into the Cook Inlet. That's Zach's number one target. And then he goes through the laundry list. Retirement benefits. My gosh, we're suffering outmigration because we don't have public employee retirement, a defined benefit plan. And then he goes into huge class sizes, K through 12. We're not spending enough on K through 12, and huge class sizes are a reason we have outmigration. And then it just keeps on going through the laundry list of things that would, interestingly enough, increase government employees and increase government union employees, which Zach represents in his private life. Increase those and increase government spending. What we've done is we've gone to look at the numbers as opposed to just, the touchy-feely, oh, I know what's causing it because I have a good grip on these things. And we've looked at the numbers, and you can go to the Federal Reserve St. Louis, which has just this wonderful series of charts that you can develop and look at and compare all sorts of various things. And we've looked at what's going on, a couple of factors that are going on with respect to Alaska population. If you've got that, Michael, pop it up for a second. Thank you. All right. So this chart plots over, we've been looking at things from 2000 forward, a variety of things from 2000 forward. This charts Alaska population, which is the top line, what it looks like brown on the chart, the top line, and plots that over time since 2000, and then plots real median household income in the United States, the median income per family in the United States as a whole, and that's the blue line, the thick blue line that runs through the middle, and then plots Alaska median income, real median income after inflation median income is what I mean by real. Plots that, and that's in the brown or the orangish line that's spending a lot of its time on the bottom. And here's what you see when you look at the Alaska population line. It goes up and up and up, and this is on a scale of 100, the base being the 2020 number, and then the increase or decrease since 2020 is what's being measured in these other lines. And you look at the population, and it starts in 2000 and goes up and up and up and up and up until about 2017. And then it starts coming down. You could look at the line and say it's stabilizing, but actually it's coming down. It's starting to come down. And that's an indication of the population outmigration that we're suffering. And again, if you went inside that line, the top 20% and older Alaskans, those 60 and older, that number's going up. What's really driving that number down is middle and lower income Alaskans and Alaskans below 60%, working age Alaska families. That's what's driving that number down. So the number starts in about 2017 and starts coming down. Look what else happens in about 2017. Alaska median household income goes a little bit below U.S. median household income. For some of the time, it goes above median household income, U.S. median household income for some of the time. But in 2017, there's a sharp break.
It craters. It's not a sharp break. That's a cratering.
And what happens is U.S. median income goes up significantly from 2017 on, while Alaska median income is going down from 2017 going on. And again, if you go inside those numbers, go inside the Alaska numbers, the top 20% number is actually going up. Real median income among the top 20% Alaskans are going up. Same is true for those above 60. It is middle and lower income Alaska families, and it is Alaskans, working age Alaska families, headed by somebody that's in the working age, below 60, that are going down. And so what's driving that number down is, if it was just the top 20% and just older Alaskans, that number would be going up. The Alaska real median average income would be going up. What's driving that number down is what's going on with middle and lower income Alaska families and Alaskans below 60%. And so you see that in 2017, Alaska population starts coming down, and you see that the divergence between U.S. median household income and Alaska's median household income is sharply going down. And again, it's going down more for those in middle and lower income brackets, and it's going down for those more working age. It's not the failure to have toys. It's not the failure to have investments in all the things that Zach Fields and others want to invest in. It's the fact that that middle and lower income Alaska families and working age Alaska families have dropping real income. Compared to inflation, the income is dropping. Compared to the lower 48, compared to the U.S. average, the income is dropping. It's not the lack of investment, it's the lack of income that's affecting Alaska's outmigration. And the correlation between the point at which population starts going down and the point at which Alaska real income starts coming down is stark. I mean, they're just occurring at the same period of time. Alaska income is coming up, but it still is lagging lower 48 U.S. average income. And so it's not the lack of investment, it's the lack of income that's causing this problem. And Zach Fields' solution, which is for government to spend more, which means government would have to take more out of the pockets of Alaskans, and because we use PFD cuts, more out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. Zach Fields' solution would actually make it worse by reducing income even more.
Yeah, I mean, the answer here, of course, is more. More government spending, more out of the pocket of private individuals, more out of the private economy, not even caring what the private economy is doing. Again, this goes back to that divorcing of the public and the private economy, where they don't see any connectivity. And so they immediately connect any of their pet projects to the problem of outmigration. And that's obviously not the answer. Final thoughts on this, Brad, before we move on.
Well, legislators, I mean, Zach Fields is indicative of the problem we have with our legislators. Legislators in Alaska tend to say problem, solution is more government spending, without looking really at the numbers and without really looking at the cause. The problem here isn't lack of government spending. The problem here is loss of income. And we're making it worse by using PFD cuts, which are targeting the very Alaskans that are affected by the loss of income. We're making it worse instead of better. So legislators should think, how do I get income up, as opposed to how do I get government spending up, which makes income worse.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. For those of you on the radio who are like, what brown line, what blue line, what? You can go out and look at it on Facebook, or you can go to AK4SB on Facebook, where Brad Keithley has got these charts posted, or you can go back and watch today's show and look through the video segments there, and you can see this. It's kind of shocking to see it on paper, or on pixels, I guess, in this case. All right, we're back with more right after this. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest to discuss this. And of course, the other factor is, of course, as our economy continues to stutter and suffer, is that, the outside economy has been doing fairly well. And so it becomes more attractive. Do I sit here and take the slings and arrows and the pains of trying to live here with a reduced income, or do I go to another state where things are booming and, we just sit here and do it? Chris asks the question from YouTube, is there a chance that the line drop on the graph is directly caused by the overtaxation of the PFD? I mean, I think that's a direct correlation to what you were just talking about, right, Brad?
Well, some of that drop, I mean, the drop in income is huge, and there's more going on than just the cut in the PFD. But the cut in the PFD is certainly contributing to it, and the fact that we continue to cut the PFD, that we haven't restored the statutory PFD, the current law PFD, is certainly continuing to weigh on Alaska income. It costs more to live in Alaska. We all know that, and part of the way of dealing with that is having higher income. But now we've got a situation where Alaska income, real household income, is declining compared to the lower 48. People are mobile. I mean, yeah, you got a job here, you get a job in the lower 48.
Well, I think that's the blessing of COVID these days, is that people are even more mobile than they used to be. They can work, across state lines. They can be mobile. They can be lightweight. People's mindset changed after COVID. I mean, they thought they were going to die. And so people divested themselves of stuff, and they went out and did things, and they just, their priorities changed, and they started to idolize experiences more than necessarily than income. And I mean, so many things changed in the workforce on top of that. And the fact is that we were in the middle of a recession and still hadn't come out of it by the time COVID hit. I mean, there's a lot of factors going in there, but the bottom line is that more government spending does not help with this. No matter how much they want to paint the picture that that's what we need is more, that's not what's going on.
It's almost like they want to deal with. I've toyed with this as a title for a Friday column. It's almost like they want to deal with this by increasing the number of rides at Disneyland, right? We want to attract you to Disneyland by increasing the number of rides. Now, we're going to increase the prices too. And so your real ability to spend on these rides is going down. But we want to increase the toys. We want to increase the trinkets that are around. And people like Zach Fields and others say, well, if we just increase the trinkets, if we just increase the number of rides at Disneyland, then we'll attract more people. No, people have to have income. People need to have income to live. And if your real income is going down, your inflation adjusted income is going down, and particularly if it's going down at the time when your competitors in other states' real income is going up, you're just going to leave. I mean, you can have all the trinkets you want, you can have all the rides you want, but I guess to continue the analogy, you're going to go to Universal, which has as many rides but has cheaper prices. You're going to go someplace else instead of going to Disneyland, and that's what's going on here in Alaska. We're trying. Some say we need to increase the number of rides. We need to increase the amount of government spending, but your real income is going down. What we need in the legislature are champions who talk about income of Alaskans and how to improve the income of Alaskans, as opposed to, oh no, we're just going to increase the number of rides,
right,
and we'll attract people that way.
Well, and the problem is we keep looking to the government, whether it's the state or the Fed. Frank says, bingo, the ADN had an editorial. Why is this state repeatedly dropping the ball on federal funding? Why stop looking at government funding? I mean, what is happening to the private economy? That's the whole problem here. I mean, why are we ignoring what's happening in the private economy as if somehow the government actually produces anything? Government is a net consumer. It's not a producer. There's only so many dollars in the economy right now that are being produced, and it's all being produced by the private sector. So the government can take whatever it wants, but it's not producing anything in that regard. And that's the problem. Even if it's hiring, it's just redistributing private sector dollars through itself. 5 seconds here. Sorry, I didn't mean to bloviate. Let's go.
Hold on. The Zach Field solution is to suck more money out of income, and that's the wrong solution.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
I made the mistake of making a point right before we came back to the radio. Anyway, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We're on to number 2. Number 2, the not-so-secret Alaska legislative motto. They have a motto, Brad, apparently. Did they get a tattoo? I just want to know. Is it, a tat? What is the not-so-secret Alaska legislative motto? And what's your point on it? Let's talk about that.
Well, the not so secret Alaska motto is the less you make, the more we take. The less money you have in your pocket, the more of it we're going to take as a percent of the money you have in your pocket. That's the motto. I guess the converse of that, or the flip side of that, is the more you make, the less we take. The more money you have, the less we're going to take of it, because we're taking it from those who have less. Instead to cover this government spending. What triggered that realization that that's the Alaska legislative motto is the announcement of this year's permanent fund dividend, and looking at the impact of the permanent fund dividend cuts on Alaskans, the amount that the government withheld, the legislature, which essentially has a veto on this issue, the amount the legislature withheld to fund government as opposed to distributing it according to the statute. We see all sorts of articles out there in all of the various press, the ADN, the Alaska Beacon, the Juneau Empire, Ketchikan had an article, Fairbanks had an article. We see all sorts of articles out there about the size of the PFD. A few of them, not many, compare it to the size of the PFD in the governor's budget that was announced, that the governor announced last December, the projected amount of the PFD. A few of them say, well, this is the amount of the PFD the legislature has appropriated compared to the size of the PFD that the governor proposed. But none of the news outlets take it down to the level of what's the impact of the PFD cuts on Alaska families. What's the impact of what's going on with Alaska families? None of them do that. They all just parrot the administration's press release that said this is the amount of the PFD, and boy, aren't we lucky that we're getting any money at all. We, on the other hand, took to the numbers and have done an analysis that we'll write about more this coming Friday. But we've done an analysis of what the impact of these PFD cuts, the PFD cuts this year, are on Alaska families. And this is a great follow-on to the first segment that talks about the problem with outmigration is income among middle and lower income, among working age Alaska families. The problem is income. And now we're going to talk about one of the drivers of why that income is going down, and how Alaskans are being affected by, which Alaskans are being affected by the income drop. For those on the radio, Michael just put up a chart that shows the in the blocks, in the columns, shows the average income by income bracket taken from IRS data. Has a red line that shows the percent of government take by that same income bracket, the share of income that's being taken through PFD cuts by income bracket, and shows as a yellow or as a gold dotted line the average level of take. That is, if you just looked at the amount of the PFD cuts compared to overall adjusted gross income, this would be the average effect across all income brackets. It is in essence a calculation of what the flat tax would be if you used a flat tax to raise the same amount of money as they're raising through PFD cuts. And the numbers are stark. The IRS breaks down income brackets into the top 1%, the top 5%, the top 10%, the top 25%. Then they switch over to quartiles, the top 25%, the upper middle 25%, the lower middle 25%, and then the low 25%. And what we've got with these columns is the average income in each of these quartiles. In the top 1%, the average income, according to IRS data, the average income of the top 1% in Alaska, average income is roughly $1.5 million a year. That's the average income. And from that category, from that income bracket, PFD cuts are taking 0.3%. That number then climbs, the percent taken from the various income bracket then climbs the farther down in income you go. The top 25%, the top quartile, has an average income. Top quartile has an average income of $250,000. To be an average earner in the top, average income in the top quartile, the income is $250,000. PFD cuts take 2.0% from that income bracket. The average take from all the income brackets is roughly 3.9%. So from the top 25%, the top 25%, if we all chipped in as an average share of income to pay for the government costs that are being taken through PFD cuts, we'd all have a tax of about 3.9%. The top 20%, top 25% is getting away with only contributing 2% compared to the 3.9%. And then you go to the subsequent income brackets. The upper middle income bracket is the PFD cuts take 4.6 on average from that income bracket, take 7.1% on average from the lower middle income bracket, and take 15% as a share of income from the low 25% income bracket. In other words, by using PFD cuts, the legislature is taking more from those who have less. The less you have, the less income you have, the more as a percent of income the legislature is taking.
30 times more at the lower income versus the upper income.
Yep, exactly right, Michael. And so you wonder about, you go back to the previous segment and you think about what is causing this income problem, what's causing the outmigration, what's driving lower Alaska income among, guess who, middle and lower income Alaska families, and among those 60 and below, And then you look at a chart like this and you say, well, this is a big contributor to it. We are taxing through PFD cuts. We are taxing the very people that we claim we want to keep. Zach Fields wants to keep them by building more Disneyland rides. But what we're doing is we're driving them more and more out of the state by lowering their income more and more, compared not only to an absolute, but also compared to what's going on in the lower 48. It's a surprise. Frankly, we haven't lost more people when you look at this sort of revenue approach that the state's using. And as I said, Fields's and others' approach of, well, we're just going to build more Disneyland rides. What we need to do is spend more government money on the Cook Inlet. We need to spend more money on K through 12. We need to spend more money on this, that, and the other thing. And we're going to take it out of the pockets. We're going to continue to use PFD cuts and continue to take it out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. You're just driving this problem deeper and deeper and deeper. So the press is not doing Alaskans any favors by stopping the story at here's what the PFD is and here's what it would have been had we followed the statute or had we used the governor's budget. They're not stepping further and looking at the impact of using PFD cuts to fund government on Alaska families. And that's what this chart and what the other analyses we've done that tries to break down the distributional effects of PFD cuts do. They look at that impact by income bracket. And this is roughly the same type of analysis you would see if you did it by age.
Right.
Because 60 and older Alaska families have higher incomes and have growing incomes compared to those below 60, real incomes compared to those below 60.
One of the interesting numbers for me is that, that upper middle class number where you're making $87,000 or more in that upper middle class, you're paying, 15, 20 times as a portion of your income compared to what the top 1% is paying as far as a portion of their income towards that kind of thing. Because probably most of the listeners of this program is somewhere in the upper middle, between the upper middle and the top 20%. That's probably where they fall in there, between $85,000 and $150,000 in income. And you're paying, again, 10, 15, 18 times what as a percentage of your income towards state government than the higher income earners. It's and there's less of them than there are of you. So they're taking that bigger chunk out of all of those folks. And people just don't even think about it. There's, I was saying it earlier this week, is that people used to be more like, they were outraged about what's happened with the PFD. And these days, they're not as outraged. They're more like, meh. I mean, it kind of feels that way, right? It's like it's almost like they've lost hope in trying to stop this thing.
Well, I think part of it's lost hope, but I think part of it's lack of information. I mean, the governor, if the governor truly believed in the PFD, he would be highlighting impacts like this. He would be showing the impact by income bracket, the impact by age group of what PFD cuts are doing, showing what the legislature's doing by using PFD cuts to fund government. If the governor were truly concerned about the PFD, he would be doing that. He's not. The press isn't. And so I don't think Alaskans really understand how they're being treated, the unfairness with which they're being treated by using PFD cuts as a source of government revenue. I think they're lulled into thinking, everybody's affected the same because, it takes the same amount out of everybody's pocket. They don't look at it on a share of income basis and look at the disparity in impact on a share of income basis that PFD cuts are. And the reason is they're not seeing the information.
And you summate this whole thing with a quote at the very bottom of the chart, which we didn't get to, but it says, let's be honest, a cut to the PFD is a tax, the most regressive tax ever proposed. And that was from the ICER professor, Matt Berman, in his recent article here last year in the ADN, basically calling a spade and saying it's a tax, the most regressive tax ever proposed, by taking it from the vast majority of Alaskans.
Yeah, we have people who are outraged when, I still recall when Representative Carpenter proposed a sales tax. Democrats in the legislature had this visceral reaction. Oh my God, sales tax, hugely regressive. Can't ever have a sales tax. If we ever going to do anything, it needs to be something other than a sales tax. And the irony of that was that PFD cuts are orders of magnitude worse in terms of their regressivity, in terms of their adverse impact on middle and lower income Alaska families, orders of magnitude worse than sales taxes. And yet that is something that those same Democrats who were complaining about sales taxes, that's something that they continually vote for.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We've got more coming up in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with number 3 right after this. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Harold actually asked an interesting question, which I think would be an interesting thing to have on the chart somewhere there, Brad. He says, you need something similar to volume-weighted average price. How many low-income folks are there versus higher-income earners as well? I think that would be an interesting comparative to have somewhere, or baked into the chart in some way, because I think it would also show that there's a smaller percentile of those top income earners who are basically controlling the way the spending of the state is going, and they're holding the rest of the state hostage, essentially, to this government spend and forcing them to pay. Because I guarantee you there's a lot more low-income earners than there are top-income earners in the long run.
Well, that's what the quartiles are, though, Michael. So the top 25% is 25% of the households in Alaska. The
right.
upper middle income of 25% is another 25%. The top 1% is 1% of Alaska households. So it's in there. And so you can make that point. The 25%, the top 25% pay less than they would using an average rate approach. Certainly pay less than the upper middle and lower middle do, or lower income do. That's 25% of Alaska families. The other 75% of Alaska families, and IRS data uses quartile data as opposed to quintile data. So that's why I'm talking about 25% as opposed to 20%. But the other 75% of Alaska families are suffering more, having more taken out of their pocket than they would use an average tax approach. So that's what the quartiles are doing. They are telling you by quartile, by groups of 25% of Alaska families, are telling you what the impact is.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Let's shift gears real quick. Charlie had a question early on and we didn't get to it. So let me go back to it because I thought it was an interesting question. What do you think about the governor's hiring a firm to examine the permanent fund's policies and ethics? And this goes back to our discussions on, some of the changes that should happen to the permanent fund board and your assertion that we need a more professional board. Does it need an outside firm to examine it, or do we just need to go in there and make it more professional? What is your thought on that?
This is using leeches to address a problem. We've got a problem. The problem isn't the procedures and the policies. The problem is the people. The problem is we don't have sophisticated, professional, experienced investor people knowledgeable about the investment industry. We don't have them on the board. And you can deal with, you can put a bunch of lawyers out there, you can put a bunch of reports out there and tell these people to do things differently, but they still don't understand because they aren't investment professionals. So until you deal with the cancer by going in and addressing the cancer, putting leeches on the body, having lawyers out there,
Whoa! Did you just compare leeches to lawyers or
oh,
lawyers?
maybe
That might be insulting to leeches. I mean, come on.
just having reports out there is not addressing the central issue.
Yeah.
And we've got to address the central issue. I mean, the governor's doing it for PR. The governor does a lot of stuff for PR these days, but the governor is doing it for PR. I'm active. I'm doing something. Well, you're doing the wrong thing to solve the cancer. Let's refashion the board. Let's get a proposal up to refashion the board.
Yeah, and it's not just putting people in who are part of the investment industry, like Ellie Rubenstein, et cetera, who might benefit, but for people who have a true understanding and who have worked for funds to not for glorification of themselves or their own outside interests, but for the actual benefit of the permanent fund. Harold's pointed out several times over the last couple of weeks, the markets are doing well. Why is the fund stalled, right? I mean, what are the investment challenges and changes that aren't happening that should be happening? That's
the board that decides the allocations. I mean, we can
right.
we can complain about the staff all we want, but it's the board who decides the allocations between the various investment categories, and that's what's stalling the growth of the allocation that we've got right now. Is what's stalling the growth.
Kyle says, sounds like y'all are advocating for means tested PFDs. That's an odd position for conservative. I never said means tested. I don't think Brad ever said means tested that should only be paid. I think it's, again, dissecting the costs of it has nothing to do with means testing, but you do you, Boo. It's your lie. You tell it. You go for it.
I've got an entire column, Kyle, that I will send you that talks about why means testing isn't a solution. It's just an additional part of the problem.
All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3 continues. The final one is in the hopper. We're ready to go. Please like and share, like and follow. Wherever you're watching, you can share it. Why don't you? Please. Let's go. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yep, that's me. We're ready to go here. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Number 3, Larry Persily, who's never taken an opportunity not to write an opinion piece to increase the size and scope of government. I mean, that guy. Oof, man. But essentially, he's written a piece here recently about analysis of the governor's vetoes and his actions and everything else. And Brad says, well, he seems to have got it right. Why doesn't he use this same kind of ideology and analysis of the legislature's accent on it? But give me your thoughts on this, Brad.
Occasionally I read columns or I read something that makes me snort my coffee out through my nose. I just sort of explode in a guffaw in humor. And this column by Persily was one of those that did that. It's an opinion piece. It's in this past week's ADN. Title of it is Dunleavy's ideological vetoes are making Alaska's tax structure less fair. And he's talking in that column about the Turo tax, the rental car tax that we talked about on a couple of shows back, and about the inconsistency of taxing one segment of the rental car industry one way and taxing or not taxing because they aren't enforcing the tax another segment of the rental car industry another way, creating a disparity between the two segments of the rental car industry. And then he also refers to at the end, as I did on the segment on the show a couple of weeks ago,
right,
also refers to the vaping tax or the e-cigarette tax that the governor vetoed a couple of years ago that Gary Stevens had championed to try to increase the tax on e-cigarettes comparable to the tax on tobacco cigarettes. And Persily writes an entire column about how that the governor's vetoing legislation that would make the tax structure more fair, and in the consequence, making the tax structure less fair. Well, that's great, but we're talking about sort of millions of dollars in those vetoes, single digit, maybe double digit millions of dollars in terms of tax unfairness. What struck me about this is that Persily is one of the biggest advocates of the legislature's tax unfairness in terms of using PFD cuts to raise money for government, as opposed to flat taxes or another approach to taxes that would be more fair among Alaska families between the income brackets. Persily not only doesn't recognize that as unfairness, he's an advocate of that unfairness in other columns, and is a big advocate of using PFD cuts to fund government, notwithstanding the fact doesn't even admit the adverse impact that they have on Alaska families in terms of the unequal impact, the unfair impact it has on middle and lower income Alaska families. So the hypocrisy of him writing about tax unfairness when it's the governor who's engaged in this tax unfairness, when it's the governor who's perpetuating this disparity between one part of the rental car industry and another part of the rental car industry, or one part of the smoking, if you include e-cigarettes as part of smoking, one part of the smoking industry as compared to another. The hypocrisy of complaining about the governor perpetuating tax unfairness in that situation, but not only ignoring the legislature's tax unfairness in terms of using PFD cuts as opposed to more neutral, more average revenue approaches, more fair revenue approaches. The fact that Persily ignores that when it's the legislature and indeed is an advocate of it, I think just shows the hypocrisy that Larry pursues on these issues in spades. I mean, if it's good enough to complain about the governor when he's engaged in tax unfairness, by gosh, and we're talking about single digit and double digit millions of dollars. My gosh, you ought to be complaining about the tax unfairness that the legislature is engaged in when they're coming up with revenue that is measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars, if not the billions of dollars.
Right. No, it is frustrating. And of course, I love how he tries to split hairs here. I mean, going back to the vape thing, it's interesting because he writes that the governor said a tax increase on the people is not something I could support, that the governor wrote in his veto statement against extending the tax to vape products, yet it was not a tax increase. And yet it doesn't, this is just a personal thing. The analysis, they don't realize is that there's already a tax on these products in many locations. Both Anchorage and Wasilla are taxing these things that are approaching 50% of the value. A 50% tax already for people, especially using vape as a smoke cessation thing. It's like you're already taxing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As long as it's my pet thing, you can't tax it because that's unfair. If it's what I want, then I'm okay with it. Well, and that's,
he's not only okay with it if it's what I want, if I'm spending it on what I want, it's not only okay, it's something I'm an advocate of. I mean, that's the hypocrisy of this. It might be one thing if Persily was complaining about the governor's tax policy as being unfair and just stopped there. But he doesn't. He doesn't stop there. He's an advocate of the huge tax unfairness that's going on in the legislature in terms of using PFD cuts as the revenue source. So it's not just he's a hypocrite because he mentions one thing and he doesn't mention the other. He's a huge hypocrite because he mentions one thing and he advocates the exact reverse when it comes to the legislature.
There's a theme today, Brad. That theme seems to be more government spending, and we should be getting more money. And we should, this whole theme comes back to more, MOAR, more in the long run. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong, but it's more for the wrong thing. I mean, what the first segment showed is we need more income in Alaskans' pockets to make them to reduce the disparity between what's going on up here and what's going on in the lower 48. And what in the first segment showed that Alaskans are voting with their feet by leaving because we're treating them unfairly, because they have lower income compared to the higher income. So we do need more, but we need more income in the pockets of Alaska families as opposed to more in the pockets of government. And by taking it and by saying that we need more in the pockets of government, all we're doing is we're setting up a situation where we're going to be taking even more out of the pockets of working Alaska families, out of the pockets of middle and lower income Alaska families. And it's just, I mean, the disparity is huge. The more, yes, we need more, but we need more in terms of staying in the pockets of Alaska families to make them more competitive, to make Alaska more competitive with what's going on in the lower 48 compared to more in the pockets of government.
Brad Keithley, final thoughts. We're down to the last 2 minutes here, so wrap it up for us here. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Michael, some people say the PFD is just, is a thing in the past. We don't need to worry about it. It's gone anyway, and forget about it. The problem is using PFD cuts to fund government is having a huge impact on middle and lower income Alaska families, on the income of middle and lower income Alaska families. It's having a huge impact on the competitiveness of Alaska income compared to income in the lower 48, and that is contributing to the drop in population among working Alaska families. We need to correct that, and we correct that both by talking about the PFD. We correct that by having information out there about the PFD, about what it's doing to middle and lower income Alaska families. And we have information, and we talk about it by talking about the hypocrisy of some who want to complain about the governor's unfair tax policy, but then turn a blind eye, indeed become advocates for the similar unfairness that's going on in the legislature that has an even bigger impact.
Brad, what are you working on for this Friday? Final thoughts. One minute here.
Well, it's going to be the middle segment we did, talking about the impact. I complained about there not being enough information out there. I'm going to put information out there about the impact of this year's PFD cut by income bracket and by family.
And I think that's an important thing to look at. Again, understanding that middle class, upper middle class Alaskans are paying 15 to 18 times what their brethren in the upper quintiles are paying towards state government as a portion of their income. That ought to make you mad. I mean, that just ought to agitate you. And if it doesn't, maybe we need to have more outrage again about the PFD. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board, folks. Hour 2 is dead ahead. I got some thoughts we're going to share here. That's all coming up next. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. I mean, Brad, this just really comes back, and I sound like a broken record, but this really comes back again and again and again to this disconnect between the public and the private economy. We see all these problems, right? And whether it's out-migration or gas or, all these other things. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the government has no connection to what's going on you want to know what the out-migration problem is? Alaska's private economy is in the doldrums and has been for 15 years, right? We were in a recession for years. We never even came out of that recession before COVID hit, and we're still, adjusting to the quote unquote new normal. You want to know why people are going outside? Greener pastures, better economies, better monies, things that they can do. And the government there's no incentive to improve the private economy. Their answer, because they can't see anything else, their answer is always more government spending because they can't see a benefit to the private economy.
Yeah, and they're blinding themselves from the information that tells them what's going on in the private sector among Alaska families. They're blinding themselves from that by not doing the distributional analysis that would show you the impact. I mean, the very families that they claim to be, worried about, the middle and lower income, the working age Alaska families, the very Alaska families that they claim to be worried about, they're making their lives worse by taking dollars out of their pockets, lowering their family income, lowering household income, and creating an even bigger gap against lower 48 household income while they're doing it. They're making the problem worse. They're telling themselves if we build more rides at Disneyland, we'll make the problem better because we'll make Alaska more attractive because we'll have more rides at Disneyland. But they're not focusing on the fact that you got to have income before you go to Disneyland. You got to have income that makes you want to stay in Alaska before you even care about the rides. You've got to have enough to make your way here. And what's going on when you look at that first chart? What's going on is Alaska real income after inflation income is dropping compared to what's going on in the lower 48. We're gaining some of it back, but we aren't even close to getting back to the trajectory that the lower 48 income is on, and we're losing population. People think about money in their pocket before they think about Disneyland rides. They think about, can I afford my rent? Can I afford my groceries? Can I afford to live here? Before they think about the Disneyland rides of that Zach Fields wants to build out there. And the legislature is going in reverse by taking money out of the pockets of the very, very people that they want to, they want to keep here, taking money out of their pockets to create these additional Disneyland rides that people won't ride because they don't have the income to stay here. They don't have the competitive income to stay here.
Right.
So it's, and the legislature is blinding itself by not looking at this information on a distributional basis. They're not looking at what's going on to middle and lower income Alaska families, to the real income of middle and lower income Alaska families, of working age Alaska families.
Well, this is that secondary politician's disease. The CAFR had a piece out, and Reason was actually writing about this earlier. And this is a bigger problem when they're talking about what's going on at the federal level. Nobody wants to make the hard decisions. The PFD pot is an easy pot of money to pull from. That's the easiest thing. Everything else would take work. Everything else might take compromise. Everything else might take, a little bit of effort. Same thing's happening at the national level. I mean, they should be, Mike Johnson got back in as speaker saying he was going to return to normal order. He can't even get a continuing resolution passed right now. To keep government funded. They continue to abdicate their responsibilities and take the easy path instead of doing the hard things. And yes, paying attention to the private economy is one of the harder things because it's just easier to just keep taking it out of the PFD. You don't have to fight with anybody over it. You've got the power to do it, but you're not looking at the unintended consequences and the long-term effects of it.
And you've got people, I mean, I complain about Zach Fields and the Democrats, but you've got people like Will Stapp, and you got people like Delana Johnson, who was co-chair of House Finance, and their focus is on government, is on, can I restrain the spending of government? It's not on income. It's not on family income. And that's part of the problem. Everybody's bought in one way or another to the fact, we got to spend. It's just the amount of additional spending we've got to do. They're not focused on how they're raising the revenue and how the way they're raising that revenue is having an impact on middle and lower income Alaska families, on working Alaska families. They're not focused on income. And until you focus on income, until you look at it on a distributional basis, you're not going to get the answer right.
Well, and it's the disdain too, right? It's the Jennifer Johnson. All these people are just spending it on big screen TVs, or they're drinking it up. It's alcohol, or it's, trips to Hawaii or whatever. It's the disdain that they feel for people to be able to make their own decisions. We had Tyler Ivanoff on the program yesterday, and he highlighted all the things that people in his area, in a village with no running water, what they're spending it on. And it definitely ain't trips to Hawaii and big screen TVs, right? It's fuel in the tank, and it's vehicles that they could be safe in and everything else. But I mean, that's why when you look at it and you see that those people are affected 30 times more than people in the top 1%, that we should be, those numbers should be stark, and people should be paying attention to it. All right, Brad. Thanks so much for coming on board with us today. We are out of time. We got to go. Appreciate you sharing with us, as always, my friend.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got more coming up. Hour 2 is dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's get to it. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of this Tuesday edition of the show, and we just finished up with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. If you missed it, it's always one of the best segments of the week, and lots of good information, and you should go back and listen to it on Spotify. If you haven't checked it out yet, that's a good place to get your podcast. Spotify or Castbox, Stitcher, wherever. Or, of course, if you want to see the charts and everything, you can go back to Facebook or YouTube and watch the replay of this morning's broadcast on the video screen there, and you can get access to the charts and everything else that Brad uses as well. And I highly recommend that you should go back and take a look at those things. I want to talk at the end there. Brad and I got into a discussion about, doing the easy thing versus doing the thing that is going to have a better long-term impact. And what we're seeing here is kind of the second phase of the politician's disease. We all know that the first phase of the politician's disease is we know better than you how you should blank. Spend your money, raise your children, live your life, organize your finances, whatever it is. They somehow feel like that because they were elected by the people, that they have been anointed with some kind of special I don't know, some kind of special, intelligence to choose those things for us better than we could choose for ourselves. And again, I was just mentioning during the break there, people like Jennifer Johnston and others who have made comments about the use of the PFD. Johnston's comments were I think more offensive than any of the others, talking about drinking up the PFDs. But there's been other people who've talked about, buying big screen TVs or buying trips to Hawaii or whatever that people have done in the past with their PFDs, which, first of all, I find highly offensive to begin with, because that is your money. If you want to spend it on things that are what others would consider to be frivolous, that's your right to do so. Whether you think they're frivolous or not, that's your right to do so. I don't care. I've said it a million times. If you want to take your PFDs and do hookers and blow, then there you go. Is it a good choice? Probably not. But is it up to me to decide what you should spend your money on? Absolutely not. So that's the first problem there, is the first politician's disease is deciding that they know better than you what, how to do whatever it is. The second part is that they always want to take the easiest way out. They always want to take the easy, and this kind of goes back to the national level, right? That they were just talking about. They're trying to get a continuing resolution on right now because the fiscal year ends in 6 days for the federal government. Their fiscal year ends on September 30th. And so they're desperately trying to get a continuing resolution on, even though Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the House, had ran on a platform to be Speaker of going back to regular orders where they pass 12 budget bills every year to fund the government, which they haven't done in over a quarter of a century. They have not passed an actual budget for 25 years. Last time they passed it was 1996 was the last year that they actually got a bunch of bills together and did the 12 consecutive budget bills. They've not returning to regular order. Why? Because it's harder. It's harder. That's why, because they have to stand by their vote, because there might have to be compromise, because they might have to admit that they're spending us into oblivion. I mean, there's warning signs everywhere. There's warning signs everywhere that we are spending more than we take in, and that when that spending reaches 115, 120, 150% of GDP, that there is potentially no going back from that point of no return. There are plenty of alarms sounding, but nobody wants to stop. And it's the same way in the state of Alaska. The easiest pot of money, the easiest way to balance the budget is to just take money from the PFD. That's the easiest way. Now, it has plenty of unintended consequences. The biggest unintended consequence, of course, is the sacrificing of the private economy. And then they go, well, why are people moving out? Well, because you've continued to sacrifice the private economy, and now it's struggling compared to other places in the U.S. where they have no disconnect between the public and the private economy, because the state governments realize that they have to have a healthy, robust private economy for them to exist, because that's where they get their revenues, because Alaska is disconnected from their revenue source. That means since Alaska's revenue source is not the private economy per se, but instead they draw money from the oil industry directly, and they get it from the permanent fund. And because those things are going on, they have no care. They give zero poops about what happens in the private economy because they get their money from somewhere else. And that also means that every one of their answers, including Zach Fields, every one of their answers about, well, how do we retain more people, is that we spend more money. We do more things. We give you more shiny toys. Instead of fixing the baseline problem, we give you more shiny toys. Again, never asking the question, well, what does that cost and where do those monies come from? And we talked yesterday about the doom loop. I mean, there are plenty of them you can look around and see them. People are moving out because the private economy is not doing great and people are not doing great financially. So they move out. So with the remainder that are here, the legislature says, well, we need to spend more money on shiny things and toys to keep people here. And of course, that's going to cost you more. So they need to take more of your money to do those shiny things, which forces more people out, which takes a fewer pound. And now the pot is smaller. And they say, well, we need more shiny toys. You see what I'm saying? That is part of the problem. It's easy to draw from the PFD. It's hard to come up with a long-term fiscal plan that includes the private economy. And since they haven't been forced to keep the private economy foremost in their minds, they really just don't care. I mean, we literally have had people who have said, other legislators have come up to them and said, well, the government economy is the economy. As long as that's okay, then everything's fine. And that is a dangerous mindset to have, because what funds the public economy? Well, eventually you realize that it is the private economy. That's eventually what feeds it. In Alaska, we're so disconnected from it that we just don't see it. And we don't feel it. And they don't have to justify it. So the easiest thing for them is to just take money from the PFD to balance the budget. And they can argue that, oh, hey, look, we've balanced the budget. We've had a balanced budget every year. And I guess technically they have. The problem is that they're balancing it on the backs of average working Alaskans and the private economy by taking the money out of the PFD. If they had to justify those programs and those expenditures by going to the people and say, well, we need you to pay more taxes because we're going to put this new shiny toy up here, this new shiny object. People would probably say, whoa, do we need that? Do we really need that? But because they don't have to do that, they don't have to go back to the people. There's no stopgap. There's no governor or regulator on that kind of spending, and they could just do it as they please. Well, then there you go. The answer is to always create some kind of new shiny object that somebody else can pay for to, that in the short term will make people happy, but in the long term, it ends up costing us more and more and more. That's the thing. Nobody is considering the unintended consequences of the actions that they're taking right now. Not that, I mean, by its very nature, unintended consequence, you can never know all the consequences of whatever action that you take, but you know that there will be at least 3 or 4 unintended consequences, some good, some bad. But when you look at something like this and you go, we're already spending $15,000, $16,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state. You want to increase it by another $400. Where does that money come from? The private economy. And what does it produce? Very little. Then what are you going? And if it's just reinforcing that, like, for example, when we start talking about the PERS and TERS thing or creating a new defined benefits tier, which benefits, 27,000 Alaska state employees, great. What does it do to the rest of us? What does it do to what does it do to the private economy? I mean, is the game plan here to create a state of nothing but government employees? They're the only ones that can afford to live here and live off the government, while the private economy becomes nothing more than a service economy? What little private economy is left in Alaska is literally just there to service the government employees that are able to remain in the state because they've gutted out the rest of the private economy, because there's no innovation and no industry, because there's no interest in having industry. I mean, this whole thing, maybe it is intentional. I mean, maybe it is intentional. And if that's, I don't know. I can't even tell anymore. Overall, what we really want is we want to make sure that the public economy is protected at all costs. Forget about what's going on with the private economy. My brain hurts when I look at this stuff. And then you look at the commentary from people like Zach Fields, where he starts off his whole opinion piece, which I've posted links up in the chat room if you want to go look at it. After a decade of outmigration strangling our economy, we need to articulate a clear path to restore economic growth to Alaska. The private economy or the public economy? That should be the first question when you hear that sentence. And the answer is the public economy. Because he goes on, as a guiding principle, the solution is simple: invest in Alaska. Whether the specific challenge at hand is an education system struggling from a decade of cuts. What? A decade of cuts? We have cut education in the last decade? We've cut it back? We're spending less today than we were then? Are you insane? Oh, well, but if inflation and the thing and it hasn't grown at the principle, it's a cut. Talk about using the right language. People complain that I say that the PFD cut is a tax, but he's out there saying this is a decade of cuts. If you didn't fund it to what we wanted it funded for the last 10 years, then that's a cut. If it didn't rise to what we consider to be the rate of inflation, that's a cut. Then he goes on, the insecurity from imported natural gas. The insecurity is not knowing whether or not we're going to have gas to heat our homes. That's the insecurity. Or the quality of life threatened by crumbling infrastructure. And then he goes on to talk about also troopers and all. It's all about, we need to articulate a clear path to restore economic growth in Alaska. And every one of those things has to do with government economic growth. Where's the incentives for private industry? Where's the discussion about creating new paths forward for different and new types of industry in the state of Alaska? Or are we just relegated to being a service economy for the state for the remainder of our lives? All right, Chris Story's coming up. We're going to talk a little bit he's actually doing 2 segments with us. The first segment, we're going to talk about this bond down on the Kenai Peninsula for hospitals. And then he's going to fold that into his weekly uplift this week. So we're going to continue with that here in just a minute. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, I'm so burned. About this. Just agitated in so many ways to Sunday. Let's get Chris on the line here before we go too far on this, and see if we can get him squared away first, just to get that out of the way. And I don't know why that is not working the way that it's supposed to. Let's try this again. We'll try it one more time. Come on. Get with the program. There we go.
Oh, no. There it is. Good morning, Michael.
How are you, my friend?
Fantastic. On top of the world.
Good,
right
good.
You wanted to find me.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those things.
What if you called and I said I'm in a bad mood? Would we still go on?
If I called and you said you're in a bad mood, I'd bring you on just to see what played out. I mean, who cares about
that?
Who cares about your FCC license? It'll be fine. We'll see Chris's. He'll say the 7 banned words and immediately afterwards. So he's in a bad mood. We'll get it done. All right. Yeah. You all ready to talk about the bond initiative, and then we'll jump into our life coaching, et cetera, et cetera?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds great. The second segment I want to call How to Win Friends and Influence Your Neighbors.
Okay. Hey, I think you stole that from somebody. I have to think about that.
Hey, he's gone now.
Yeah, right.
After how many years? Is it 70 years after somebody's death? Is there copyright?
Yeah, something like that. 70 years, or it's not. You're not, as someone once said, and then it's as what was it? Is someone or so and so always said, right? You always quote him first, as John Smith always said, and then the next time you say it, as somebody always said, and then the third time you said, as I have always said. That's how you appropriate something like that. Just remember that.
Understood.
All right. Well, hold the line here, Chris. We'll be right back to you. Let me go back to the chat room here and see what Let me just go back up here and see what you guys have been talking about. Much of the Alaska economy is supported by natural resources, not the private economy. Yes, Kyle, but we are not giving the opportunity a lot of times for the private economy to do things. We're focused in on this natural resource thing, which is important. Don't get me wrong, but we need to diversify, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree? Shouldn't we be diversifying? But the Juneau Clown Posse knows. They know everything because they have special powers. Right, exactly. Jeannie says something about the school board. Jeannie, did you get my email? Are we good for tomorrow? Let me know. Right, and current school board members are not able to change the tide, she says. Let me go over here. Good morning. There shouldn't be a public economy. I mean, I disagree with that, Jeannie. There needs to be some kind of public economy because even a smaller, more limited government is going to have some kind of, is going to have some kind of public economy on that. Yeah. Word trash salad. He wasn't talking about me. He was talking about Zach Fields. He was commenting on Zach's first. I mean, you read that piece in the ADN from Zach Fields, and your head just wants to explode, just absolutely explode. Let's see. The PFD is a shiny thing that attracts people to Alaska. Well, I mean, I guess for some, you'd really have to, for most people, a couple $1,000 isn't incentive enough to move up here. Maybe if you've got a family of 5 or something and you're talking about $10,000 instead of $2,000, maybe. But for the most part, I mean, I don't know how much of an incentive it really is, quite honestly. Too bad we can't buy those wood stoves. Wait, Dukes is agitated? No, that would never happen. I'm just sorry. I'm just going through here. We're doomed. I'm going through here. All right. We'll see where that goes. Okay. Government should be limited to public safety, education, and sustainable infrastructure. Well, there's something Harold and I can both agree on. That's what we should be focusing on. All right, well, let's jump over to Chris Story, the man from Homer. We're going to jump into this. We're about 15 seconds out. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things. Let's go right now.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
I don't know what you're saying. I'm not a pain in the anything. I'm a perfect angel. Perfect angel. You don't believe me? Just ask Chris Story. He'll tell you I'm a perfect angel. Right, Chris? Right, Chris? Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Michael Duke's radio program, my favorite, 5-star.
5-star. Would watch it again and again, much better than Cats. All right.
My mom does refer to this as her second favorite show on earth. She loves every Tuesday at around 7:45, 7:30. That's her favorite part of your show.
Wow. I mean, well, it is your mom. I can't necessarily blame her. I mean, even mom's got to love every child.
The mother's out of it.
Mom's got to love every child, no matter how badly deformed. Anyway, Chris is coming on a little bit early today. Normally he's in the final segment. Today we're getting 2 segments because Chris wanted to talk a little bit about this bond initiative that's going on down at the Kenai Peninsula Borough that has to do with the medical center. And it's a $33 million bond, $36 million bond. They want to buy some properties. And I think a lot of us probably not really up to speed on it and why it might be good and why it might be bad. So Chris had an interview this last week with somebody from the hospital who was a proponent of this bond and one of the local doctors who was an opponent of the bond. And so he got to participate in a pretty interesting conversation. And I thought he would bring some of those insights to us here on the program. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about what's going on here.
Well, first off, so Proposition 1 is for being parroted as for local health care. So let's put that onto the table. It's 38.5 million. You were close. You kept going up, and I was like pointing up. Up, 38.5 plus interest, and that's going to roughly amount to $52 million. And the way it breaks down is $4 million for nuclear medicine. I've been admonished by several listeners that it's not nuclear, it's nuclear medicine. $3 million to grow the infusion center, which is essentially bringing it back into the hospital post-COVID. They moved it out during COVID, which makes sense. Your most vulnerable people shouldn't be necessarily getting treatment in the hospital, so they moved them out. Now they want to move that back in. And by the way, they'll demolish the building if they purchase it where it is currently. $15.5 million for building maintenance and HVAC repair, boiler repair, generator, and $13 million for 3 real estate purchases, which the hospital is currently leasing. So yeah, that's that's what's on the ballot. And what's interesting is that it turns out more is on the ballot because, and so I'm the first to admit, Michael, that I pay attention. I try to pay attention to what's going on in my own backyard. But I'm busy. I'm not focused on the economy. I'm focused on your economy, helping people locally build wealth and live their dreams and find inspiration where you are with what you've got. Okay. So I'm not really plugged into this whole bond process until about a month and a half ago. And people started bringing it to my attention and saying, hey, what do you think about this? And so that's really where my interest started to go. Well, wait a minute, what is going on here? And so there was a town hall, and the CEO of the hospital, Ryan Smith, has since apologized for calling it a town hall. He said it really shouldn't have been called that because it inferred there'd be an opportunity for people to get up, stand at a microphone, and
Right.
ask a few questions
More
for a
of
few
a
minutes and so on.
more of a round table than a town hall.
And so when several people said to me, well, my question wasn't asked, they were sorting through the cards where you could write in your question, and they were self-selecting the questions they wanted to answer. And I said, well, why don't I give one of those people a platform? And his name is Dr. Paul Raymond. So he came on the program and it really brought to bear a lot of information, and the public super receptive to it. Well, the CEO of the hospital, Ryan Smith, reached out to me and said, hey, I'd like an opportunity to say, from our perspective, if you would have Dr. Raymond and I both in, and the mayor, that would be great. Well, I'm not set up for three, so I had Paul, Dr. Raymond, and Ryan in, and that's the conversation you're talking about. And today on the program, I have Mayor Peter Machicki, who, by the way, I did this interview yesterday. By the way, he called me, Michael, and this is something that you'll see T-shirts and merch. He called me the king of irrelevance. And so I'm going to wear that hat.
He called you the king of irrelevance. Awesome.
I know. And you hear all this time, you thought it was you. No, but it
I
turns out
know.
I am the king
I would
of
have
irrelevance.
expected that. Yeah, I would have expected that if he was talking to me. Yeah.
But okay, bottom line is you're correct. I facilitated the conversation, and it was interesting. I learned a tremendous amount. The listeners learned a tremendous amount, and we've got a lot more on the bond question on the ballot than just the bond. And here's what I mean by that. We're watching almost this monolith of an organization grow, and its tentacles are reaching out into the community, across the community. Everywhere you turn, you see a new sign: South Peninsula Hospital, South Peninsula Hospital. And just by example, in this kind of our second segment, so I'm hoping anybody who's got an opinion on this will hold their judgment of me for just a minute until we get into the second piece of this whole puzzle on the next segment. But if you just look around, people are asking, what is happening here? And I used in my conversation with Ryan the other day, I said, it's a little bit like one of those movies, the Western movies, where a mining company comes to town, and next thing you know, they own everything in the community. This is what we're seeing. In addition, Michael, as you well know, Homer has another question coming up pretty soon. Shall we or shall we not invest in a 350, 380, 320, 270, whatever $1 million harbor expansion, of which we all know a percentage is going to be a bond that we're going to be asked to vote on. We just are still paying off a $5 million bond for our brand new police station. We've got the most expensive water and sewer in the state of Alaska, for those of us that live here. When NSTAR decided they were going to take and subsume our whole market here and provide natural gas, which we're grateful for. However, we did it on the backs of the property owner. So in other words, infrastructure wasn't built out by the private enterprise providing the utility. We all paid $3,200 per property just for the pleasure of having gas in the street. That's unheard of. Nobody builds infrastructure about this. Is insanity. But no, this is what happens at the end of the road. All right. Now, we were just also targeted by the assessing department at the Kenai Peninsula Borough this last year. I put on a whole campaign called Freeze the Squeeze. A big group of us said, hold on, you're taking too much, too fast. Your assessments are going up way too high, too quickly. And we were completely flatly ignored. And so now we have this bond question, and there, in my opinion, this really is what got my attention. The disingenuous marketing. I said, this is enough. You're not being genuine with the people of our service area when you say you're going to enjoy the same tax that you enjoyed in 2023. What they mean is the mill levy is we're exhausting some bonds, we're exhausting some debt, and that mill was going to go down. If we pass this, that mill rate is going to go back on at 2.13. so a little bit less than 2023 levels on exorbitantly increased assessment values. So it is
Right.
not a one-to-one, hey, we're going to go back to that. So that's disingenuous. The other piece of it is we're using a methodology with which they're measuring the value of the real estate we're buying that I've, in my 25 years of real estate, have never once used or been asked to use. It's called a net present value. And the gentleman who owns the property is a good friend of mine. I'd love to see him make the best deal he possibly could. But when I asked an associate at the hospital, what other properties does the borough purchase using this methodology? Well, I don't know. That's a borough question. I asked the mayor yesterday while I had him, and it'll be airing today, and he never once would answer how we arrived at net present value valuation for properties to purchase. And my contention is we're going to create an almost untenable situation with trying to acquire any more. They'd like to acquire this whole campus area, but we're just using this methodology that we've not used before. So something just isn't right here.
Right.
And again, the 15.5 million is a bit unrestricted because, to quote the CEO, they didn't want to be hamstrung or too hamstrung by what they could do with that money. But the intention is for supporting the infrastructure behind the scenes of the hospital. So
I guess
it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I guess my number one question is, I mean, the hospital is a private organization. How can we use a bonding issue to encumber all of the public's private property to pay for something for a private organization? I guess that's or is it a community foundation or what? How does that work?
So and this is really interesting. It's a great question you just asked, and what I mentioned to Ryan Smith the other day. I said I think what's going to happen, and this could be an unintended consequence to the benefit, is that the public's going to start asking a lot more questions, and I think there's going to be a lot more people looking under the hood of this entire operation. So the best I can understand this is that the city of Homer owns, if not all, but most of the land that sits underneath the hospital. The borough owns the infrastructure, the building, the equipment, every stethoscope, every gauze, every tongue depressor is all owned by the borough. And then there's a third layer, which is the 501c3 non-for-profit you're describing. It's an incorporation. It's they call it SPH Inc., and that is a private, not a private, it's quasi-governmental operator. Okay, so they've got a CEO and they've got a board of directors. The operating board is self-selected; it's not elected. And then there's a service area board, which is elected, and that's a representative of the borough on equipment and asset acquisitions and things like that. So it's a very convoluted, but it is part of our second-class boroughs mandate that we own the hospitals. We, the people, we, the borough, own the hospitals. That's Central Peninsula and Soldotna, same as South Peninsula here. But that doesn't mean per se that they're not. So it isn't that nobody's making money. Non-profit isn't it's a non-for-profit. It's not non-profit. So in other words,
there's a difference between there's a difference between non-profit and not-for-profit. Not-for-profit entities can still make a profit. And in fact, he bragged on your program that you're making what? They're making 4%, 4.5% profit every year on $150 million.
And I was working off of 2023 figures when I said 113 million, and CEO Ryan Smith corrected me. He said, well, so closer to 150. He said, but let's just use your number since you said it. And I said, well, I said it because it's a tax document in 113 million, and they were reporting a $2.3 million net profit. And again, it's not that doesn't get distributed amongst the board. There's nothing nefarious that I'm suggesting or anybody I've heard suggest anything nefarious going on. It's not being distributed amongst employees. And in fact, the borough is a beneficiary of those net proceeds, and so I can see why hey, it behooves the community to not have a massive net at the end of the year that just then gets distributed amongst the entire peninsula versus expanding healthcare in the local area, which is what it's for. So I get all of that, but I think the real question is on a lot of people's minds is on this particular question is a lot more riding onto this than just the 38.5 million. It's going to be 52 million with interest. Now, the borough mayor is suggesting that maybe this will get retired early or get absorbed by the hospital early if they can go completely off of the public teat, similar to Central has done. But there's no guarantee of that. And as I contend, we've got a lot more in our future here. The borough gave us the Herc building, which is the old middle school, like when my mom was a little girl. So we're going back to the 50s. This is a quite old building, and it's filled with asbestos, probably lead-based paint, and it's got broken windows and boarded over. It's like this ghetto eyesore in the middle of our community. And it's 25,000 square feet. The borough sold it to us for $1. And I contend they scraped it off their shoe very, very smart and wittingly to an unwitting city council at the time who accepted it. And now we're going to have to bond to do something there, because
Right.
that cannot exist as this. It looks like a crack den, Michael. Crack den in the middle of my community? We can't have this.
Can't have that. All right. Well, if you want to explore this a little bit more, you can go back and listen to Chris's interview from last week on ILoveHomerAlaska.com. That's where his podcasts are. Go back and listen to that discussion. And now Chris is going to try and turn the tables on this. How to win friends and influence neighbors is his next segment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Why not take a quick break?
Be right back. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Chris Story is our guest. Chris, I mean, I got so many questions about this, even after listening to a good chunk of that interview that you did last week. They've got to tear buildings down. You've got this valuation of these properties that it's an unusual valuation. I mean, I'm all for people making money on their proper investment properties, but I mean, at some point, especially with public funds, there's got to be some deeper questions here. I mean, why are we tearing down? So many questions. I think that is the problem here, and I think that's why this, based on what I know so far, if I was voting in this election on October 1, I would be voting no, because there's way too many questions and not enough answers at this point.
Yeah, the building is going to be torn down is for it's a small building, probably 1,000 square feet, and it's going to be torn down for parking expansion. And it's a little bit like if you're playing Monopoly. And I kind of treat my own investment this way in my own life, is I want to own and control certain properties. Some properties I have my eye on for a while, and I want to own and control that. So I'm going to watch and try to make an offer, try to create an opportunity to go, as Wayne Gretzky said, where the puck is going. So anybody that had the foresight to invest in this particular area around a hospital, what a great idea. And as you just said, bully for you. Profits, of course, you should be able to make a profit, absolutely. And I don't contend that the property owner in this case shouldn't sell the property or shouldn't get fair market value. My question is for the authorities involved. How did you arrive at that price? And all we're being told is, well, it's the only number we could negotiate with the seller, but they don't have a written contract. They have a verbal agreement that, yeah, I guess if you were to raise the $13 million through this bond, I'd probably sell to you. And I wasn't part of the conversation, so I'm infusing some of my own, ticks there. Who knows what was really said by and between them? But it's my understanding that there is a consent that if we do raise this $13 million, that there will be a sale at $13 million. So taking that at its face, how did we arrive at a $13 million valuation? Talking with the borough mayor, talking with the hospital spokesperson, Dorota Ferrara, and then talking with the CEO. There isn't an answer that we can. It would cost us more to try to rebuild something. Okay, but what about when the roof needs repair in 5 years? Who's going to do it? Well, right now, the landlord would be responsible. If we buy it, you and I, the taxpayer, will be responsible. So those are the kinds of basic questions, as I'm saying. Why not just continue with these leases, even though but here's the other piece of it that's not part of their marketing, is right now the lease dollars comes out of the operations. And as we just found out, that's $150 million this year. That's where the lease dollars are coming from. And if we purchase these, 100% of the acquisition will come from your property tax dollars. Now, last night at the city council meeting, the report to the public was that the sales tax revenue is down in Homer this year. But guess what's significantly, I'm quoting, significantly up? Yeah, property tax revenue.
Exactly.
We know it's up. We know it's up. We're the ones paying it and
Right.
feeling the pinch. And
Exactly.
this is just going to put upon the top of that.
Jeannie asks, if the bond fails, what is the future of the facility?
Great question. So here's a better question. Well, sorry, Gene, not better, but another question. If this bond passes, will healthcare costs go down? The answer was no, absolutely not. So I don't suspect the converse would be opposite. In other words, if we don't pass this, costs aren't going to go up. The healthcare costs aren't going to go up. Now, the question a lot of people, including Dr. Raymond, are asking, why isn't, if the hospital wants to do nuclear medicine, it's only $4 million out of this 38.5, just do it. You got a $2.3 million net proceed last year. This year,
Right.
presumably, is going to be significantly more. Just do it. The community's not saying don't bring us alternatives and options. They're just saying, wait a minute, why should our property taxes go up this significantly to pay $52 million? Same thing with the infusion center. Nobody's against that. Not one person I've spoken to has said, no, don't bring more infusion opportunities. But it's only $3 million.
So
What's going on?
So
And where did the depreciation?
7 million of this, which they could fund in just a handful of years with their profits if they
Correct.
decided to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is where I'm saying I think people are going to start to take a really close look under the hood. And the 15 million for building maintenance, wait a minute, where did the depreciation and sinking funds go for depreciating generators and
Right.
infrastructure like HVAC and so forth? That's part of good stewardship of your money, especially when you're helming 150 million.
Well, and Charlie makes an interesting point, which I wasn't aware of. He says the lease is triple net. The Peninsula Hospital is responsible for all repairs and maintenance as well. So, I mean, yeah, I have a lot of questions, Chris. A lot of questions on this. And if I have so many questions, I'm going to vote no until they suss all this out. This is the problem with creating these bonds where they conglomerate everything into one. And it's got some good stuff, but then it's got some bad stuff. And they just hope you vote for the good stuff and don't pay attention to the bad stuff, has been my experience with those kind of bond packages. So if you want nuclear medicine, well, then just, suss it out in a separate deal or just pay for it. One of the two. All right, here we go. Chris Story, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Chris Story is our guest. He's bringing us the PMA today. I was going to say he's bringing us the pain. He did that in the last segment. But in this segment, he's going to talk with us, give us a little bit of positivity. And he's going to fold in what he was talking about in the last segment with the bond issue for South Peninsula Hospital. And he's going to talk to us about how to win friends and influence neighbors. Chris, welcome back. Give us your thoughts here.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. It is interesting that in all of this, they say all politics is local. That's so true. You build your wealth locally. You do all these things. Everything you're doing is really most impactful at a local level. And remembering that the people that represent you at the borough, at the state, even at the U.S. Capitol, your senators and your representatives, they're all your neighbors. In theory, they're your neighbors. Some people move here and to try to win an election and get to DC as quick as they can, get it. But by and large, the people that represent us are our neighbors. The same thing with this bond question relative to the South Peninsula Hospital. The doctors and nurses, other than the traveling ones, are our neighbors and friends. And we play pickleball together. We eat together. We are, it's friends. Same thing with the hospital board and so much of the C-suite staff, friends and neighbors. So how do we influence each other and remain friends? How do we win people to our opinion and or win a debate and yet remain friends? And I think this is an age-old question that can be answered with a single sentence: seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I'll give you an example, and it relates to the bond question. I spent a month looking at this, asking questions, probing around the edges, talking to as many people as I could before I entered the conversation. And I only entered the conversation as a result of my neighbors not being able to ask questions in an open forum and get their opinions heard. And I said, let's see. And not even having a conversation in order to influence the outcome of the election, other than to ask questions. Because I really, truly believe conversation is an art form that is either lost or practiced. And if we do not practice it more in this instant messaging, social media era, we're going to lose the ability to have conversations, to win friends, and influence our neighbors towards our way of thinking. And again, you don't start out telling everybody what you think. Start it by asking, what do you think? How did you form this opinion? I hate quoting Bill Maher, but he made an excellent point in his criticism of Americans during COVID not being able to hold two thoughts in our minds at once. So the question is, and this is really on the ballot for me, can you be both for local health care and against the $52 million bond? And I land on the side of yes, you can. Yes, I can hold both those thoughts in my head, that I am for doctors making $1.5 million a year that have earned it right here in my own backyard. Absolutely. Am I for the ability to have MRI, back surgeries, hand surgeries, internal operations, all right here, cancer treatments here? Absolutely. And I can be against the bond. So you can defend your position and listen, but you can't do both at once. You've got to be willing to listen. And are you listening just so you can then proselytize? Because I haven't spoken to anybody that is on the bond position that is even willing to take a second look at anything. They can't. It's too late in the dance to call it ugly. They can't. They have to maintain that position. Fine. But you and me and our neighbors, we can try to influence each other by asking, where do you stand on this? No, how did you develop that opinion? Oh, so okay. And I'll give you an example. A friend of mine is a good friend, been a friend for a long time, is pictured on one of the flyers that's laying in everybody's mailbox. And so I called him, or actually I texted him. I said, wow, you normally take such a low profile. I'm surprised to see you here. Help me understand what you're saying in support of this proposition. And so we ended up on the phone, and one of his positions was, I'm tired of people having to be flown out of here on a life flight. And I'm like, so you think that the you understand emergency medicine is not on the ballot. There is no 2, 5, 6, 8, 10, 25, 30, anybody that at 45, none of that is on the ballot. No millions of dollars is on the ballot for keeping somebody here who's got an emergent situation that needs to be at a specialist at Providence. That's just not on the table. And so we had this long back and forth conversation, and ultimately I was listening to him. And I will say, for what it's worth, he actually walked away going, well, okay, that's interesting. For example, he did not know that we did not have and do not have a written contract with the seller of these properties, just taking that into position. So anyway, but bottom line is, if we really want to be able to influence each other, I think remembering that we are neighbors is probably job one, and then seeking to understand before we're understood.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree. And this goes back to, again, the ability to have, to have a discussion, the ability to agree to disagree, the ability to have discourse and to be polite about it, and not immediately think that because I don't agree with you, that somehow I'm attacking you personally, which I think is what a lot of people feel like. Oh, they're attacking me personally because they don't believe what I believe. And I
And
think
to be
that,
honest, a lot of us do. I mean, just to be fair, a
yeah,
lot of us do. And I think
sure.
social media has allowed that kind of
Oh, yeah.
creepiness to really, really win the day, is to be able to
Yeah.
poke somebody in the eye. I'll give you an example. I just reached out to Brent Johnson over the weekend, who's running for House, and I've had 3 of my Sarah Vance signs vandalized. Like twice they've been kicked over, a third time broke the stick and threw it into the weeds behind the property, and another time it just vanished. And so I texted him and I said, would you reach out to your supporters, because obviously that's who's doing it, right? Would you reach out to your supporters and just tell them to knock it off? This is ridiculous. And he said, I sure will, Chris. Also, some of my signs are disappearing. I'm like, I okay, all right, fine. Neither side should be destroying the signs, but it's a conversation with somebody I fundamentally disagree with. Almost everything I've ever talked to Brent Johnson about, I disagree with. But yet we were able as neighbors to have a conversation about the efficacy of removal and actually
Right. of
vandalizing other people's property.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think you're right. Social media, a lot of people do attack, and I think that's part of the problem. I've
Yes.
found the most effective way, and as you said earlier, I found the most effective way to have these conversations is simply to ask a question. At this point, why did you do it? Oh, because I hate seeing people being flown out. Well, are you aware? Did you realize that this bond does not cover any of that type of medicine? I mean, nobody's life flighting people, cancer patients out. It's emergency patients that are getting, but we're not talking about emergency medicine. And so I think the most powerful thing we can do is to ask those questions and ask people to explain themselves in that situation so that we can understand them. And then, quite honestly, then we can formulate more questions and more arguments to say, well, were you aware of X, Y, or Z on something, and do it in a polite way. Again, not an attacking way, but are you aware that this, just get people to think about it.
Agreed, completely. And I remember Ted Stevens, his last, Hail Mary before Mark Begich in the lawfare, which I never heard the term back then, but that's exactly what was going against Ted Stevens, was lawfare from the George W. Bush Justice Department, unfortunately. But nevertheless, one of his last Hail Marys was, hey, Alaska's got an incredible amount of oil. Why don't we have a state refinery? And why don't Alaskans pay the cheapest gas in the world? How about that? We'll provide state gas at whether you like that or not, whether you disagree with that concept or not. Think about this: we have borough-owned hospitals. What if instead of can we leverage $52 million for these projects? What if we said we're going to make the Homer the most affordable in Central Peninsula, the most affordable healthcare providers in the state of Alaska? That's a question I think a lot of people would get behind. For example, a friend of mine just tore her meniscus or something. She's got a very bad knee problem. She's headed to Anchorage on Friday to have an MRI at literally 1/3 the cost of doing it here locally. That's
Right.
not going to change. That's
Right.
not going to change. People, and she's
Yeah.
got gold-plated insurance, but can't stand the idea of that kind of a price disparity. So she's willing to go to Anchorage.
Right.
And obviously, if it's a complete emergency, that's not possible. But in these kinds of cases, those are
Yeah.
better questions in my mind. How can we make healthcare more affordable?
Right.
And can we have some local control on it?
Yeah, if this ballot initiative was reducing the cost of healthcare overall, that might be a bigger question. But if it's going to remain the same or increase anyway, then again,
Yes.
I have questions, right? I mean, and if I have questions, that means I'm voting no until those questions are answered. Being kind.
And you can both have that position and not be a jerk.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, being kind doesn't cost a lot. And we can win friends and influence people, especially our neighbors, if we get to it. Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board and being with us today. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you, Michael.
Hold the line. Don't go anywhere, Chris. We're going to be back with more tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Can we just do that? Can we just be kind? Can we love one another and live well? That's what we should be doing. You don't need to tear other people down. Just ask questions. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. All right. I wanted to take one more quick bite with Chris on this because, I think and I didn't listen to your interview all the way to the end, and I apologize for that, but I've been kind of busy the last few weeks. Anyway, I think, how did Ryan acquit himself in the end? I mean, did it come off as like, this is something we just need to do and it's going to be better? But I think the doctor, from what I heard, the doctor was making some very, very valid points. And Ryan didn't really have a lot of answers for that. Again, leaving me with more questions, I guess, is the bottom line. So give us your closing thoughts on this piece, this ballot initiative, which is going to be voted on, 7 days? Give us your final thoughts on this.
Yes, 7 days from today. Well, my final thought is that in the end, I felt that the CEO, Ryan Smith, is, and I'll just put this out there. I think and I think Mayor Michicki, and I think anybody that is a proponent of this initiative has the best of intentions. I don't think, as I said early on here, I don't believe there's any nefarious accounting going on. I don't think there's any absconding of monies. There's not anything that I would look at as untoward. It's matter of principle and philosophy. And I think the scope creep with which an organization is run, it's just a natural offshoot of growth, more and more and more. And I even said, I don't know if you got to that part of the interview, but I said, this is a monopoly. And I just finished reading Peter Thiel's book, 0 to 1, and he talks about the only way to really make money, and we're not talking about small money, we're talking about big money, is to run a monopoly. And he agreed. Ryan Smith agreed. Yeah, this is a monopoly. And when you think about it like that, there, okay, are you for that or not? The question isn't, are you for local health care? And I think, again, this is what's really disingenuous about the marketing, is that they're purporting it as such that if you don't vote for this, you're not going to get local health care. And I would rather see the conversation centered around, how can we make this healthcare more affordable? Dr. Raymond years ago sold the hospital. This is before Ryan Smith was there. Sold them his X-ray machine. X-rays in Homer the next day doubled in cost. Doubled in cost, because Paul had been offering, call it 300. I don't remember what it was for a chest X-ray. It went to 650 the very next day.
Right.
Period.
Right.
The hospital had been in competition. Period. There's a plastic surgeon. This is what I'm told. I don't have direct knowledge, but a plastic surgeon moving to the area, going to set up his own shop. The hospital has now absorbed him, made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Why? Well, he might have his own OR. We don't need that kind of competition if he had an in-office OR. These kinds of questions need to be discussed as neighbors, and I think a true look under the hood. But how does Ryan come off? Great. Ryan's a superior spokesperson and a very intellectual guy. So both of them came off well, in my opinion. It's just, what do you want? Do you want your hospital to provide more and affordable, the best possible affordable emergent care, and some things done really, really well, or a broad spectrum of everything to include what's next? Dentistry?
Right.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it's start absorbing dentistry as well.
This reminds me of a fight that we had in Fairbanks over the certificate of need, where there was a surgery center that wanted to be built, and the hospital fought that tooth and nail. Why?
Yep.
Well, because the surgery center would have provided the same services at a fraction of the cost. And I was a huge proponent of that, because we needed more choice. And that's part of the problem with the certificate of need program here in the state of Alaska, is that it quashes competition. And that's, that's why it's cheaper for people to fly out to Arizona and have their teeth done. It's why it's cheaper for people to fly out to Seattle and have knee repair surgery or whatever. Even, like you said, going from Homer to Anchorage is one thing, but going from Anchorage to Seattle is a whole nother thing.
So several years ago, Tiffany was fighting some kidney stone issues and needed a stone study for the urologist. And here in Homer, it was going to be $6,000 for that stone study, CT scan with a stone study. I can't remember if it's with or without contrast, whatever that is. We went to Kenai Imaging, independent imaging, $500. Okay, you heard it correct. $6,000 here, $500 at the independent imaging. It's my understanding, and anybody out there and still listening can correct me if and where I'm wrong, Central Peninsula Hospital bought out for the tune of something around $9 million. The surgeons, the private surgery center, and absorbed the surgeons into their hospital, who owned the independent imaging and shut it down. And so as a result of that, now the next best bet is in Anchorage. I can't remember if it's called independent imaging or whatever it is up in Anchorage, where you could still get $1,000 CAT scan.
Right.
My father-in-law walked into the hospital in August here locally with a backache. Now, he walked into the emergency room. We were traveling, and my wife, Tiffany, takes, she does a lot with him and everything. So we're traveling, and he walked out with a prescription for some pain pills and $14,000 bill. And he just had a backache, just a backache and a shoulder ache. And they $14,000, Michael.
Yeah.
Now, back when I was a kid, and I grew up here and was born in this hospital, when I was a kid, Dr. Enabo, a Dr. Bell, a Dr. Raymond, a Dr. Fenger, back going how far you go back, would have said, poked, prodded, say, okay, well, talk to me about the history. I noticed you're wearing a a back brace. Is that something you wear? Okay, you wear it pretty often. Okay, so this isn't new. Okay, let's take an X-ray. Maybe. Let's just make sure you didn't fall or hurt yourself. Okay,
Right.
but what? 2 CAT scans later and a $4,000 ER bill later, it's $14,000 and a $150 pain pill prescription. I looked at this bill when we got it in the mail. I was like, oh, everybody in our family is just flabbergasted. Are you kidding me?
Right.
And this, trust me, is on the ballot when people think about those things, and that's everybody's got.
And
those
this
stories.
is and this
that's
is
on the ballot.
Yeah, and this is going to reduce nothing. This
Right.
ballot measure is not.
They've said that.
In fact, it's not going to just
reduce the cost.
It's not going to reduce the cost, and in fact, it's going to increase your property taxes. So, I mean, that's the thing. All right. Well, Chris, thanks so much, my friend. I appreciate you sticking a little bit longer with us on this. It's a fascinating issue. I recommend you go out and listen to Chris's podcast from last week at ilovehomeralaska.com. You can find it there, or you can subscribe to his podcast weekly and get everything right on your phone. So thank you,
Mayor
Chris.
Machicki's on today.
And Mayor Machicki's on today. All right. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. All right, folks, that does it for us today. Tomorrow, Jeannie Reveal from the chat room is going to be with us to talk about her run for school board, and then Mike Shower. So it's going to be a fun show tomorrow. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.